listening to Stories from Real Life, a podcast by engaging storytellers for engaged story listeners. Here's your host, author and journalist, Melvin E. Edwards.
Hello, and welcome to this June 11th edition of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. John Williams is here to tell you more about today's guest, Bob LeMent.
Welcome to Stories from Real Life with Melvin E. Edwards. Today, we are honored to have a true pioneer in the podcasting world, Bob LeMent, co-host of Static Radio. Static Radio is not just any podcast, it's one of the first 50 podcasts ever created. Since its inception in 1999, Bob has produced over 1,500 shows and guested on more than 55 other programs. As an online media pioneer, StaticRadio.com was featured on Adam Curry's original list of podcasts, marking the beginning of the podcasting era. Bob's influence extends beyond podcasting. He has been interviewed by various traditional media outlets in the U.S. and abroad about producing media for the internet. Join host Melvin E. Edwards as he explores the fascinating journey of podcasting with the legendary Bob LeMent.
John, thanks for that awesome introduction. Bob LeMent, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing pretty good. So as you heard in the introduction, you have been officially recognized as one of the first podcasters by former MTV personality Adam Curry, who coined the term podcast. You were included on the list of the 50 original podcasts. Now there are as many as 3 million podcasts, even if some of them are irregular or dormant. Mm-hmm. When did you realize you were a pioneer of sorts?
Well, I suppose at that point I did, but prior to that, I'm not sure I really recognized myself as a pioneer. I mean, the whole point of all of this was just to have a creative outlet that was something that, you know, at the time, it wasn't super easy to do, but it wasn't overly difficult either. Not like, you know, today we got all these tools and everything like we're using today. You know, back then it was all much more manual and and archaic compared to what we're doing today. Our first setup was literally a speakerphone. And that I would take the microphone from my computer and I would set it on the speakerphone, and that would capture myself and my co-host. And we recorded it straight to the computer. And that was about as simple as it got, right? And then we took that file and posted it up on the internet. There wasn't an MP3 file format at that point, so we used a thing called Real Audio, which no one in the audience probably remembers, but there was a thing called Real Audio, and that's what we ended up using during those days, which is, you know, it's kind of quaint now. You know, whenever you talk to your grandparents, they probably told you about, you know, the old times when you didn't have seat belts and no turn signals, and you had to reach your arm out to wipe off the windshield and things like that. And that's kind of the podcasting days that we were in. It was because it wasn't called podcasting; it was just called, you know, internet audio, I guess, is what the term was back then. Wasn't super fancy or coined, or we didn't have any of our own vernacular or anything. Just borrowed from everybody else.
Yeah, I do remember Real Audio. You and I are about the same age, so.
Oh, goodness gracious.
We remember. Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Yeah. Yeah, Pepperidge Farm remembers. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it was fun though. So we had done college radio. That's where all this came from, was a stint in college radio. We did a show in college that was basically kind of what we do today. I mean, you can't get any more, selfish and whiny than just doing the same thing for all these years. But we did the show. The only difference is we played music back then. And at the time that all this was happening at the beginning, we didn't play music because I was really worried about getting sued, because it was the age of Napster. And they were, suing grandmas for, getting Tommy Dorsett records or something off the internet.
Yeah, playing Happy Birthday.
Right, playing Happy Birthday. Yeah, exactly. Happy Birthday. I'm like, well, I'm not going to get involved in that. And so it kind of gelled down to what we do today, which oddly enough is we tell stories each week. Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
how that comes together here. Usually we call the tagline is the strange and humorous lives of two Midwesterners. And so, yeah, we try to tell humorous stories. And if they're not humorous, then typically they're strange. Usually the strange becomes humorous is how it goes. So it just, slice of life or slice of our lives in a way that it could happen to anybody, but maybe doesn't. You never know. Everybody's got their own thing going on. So. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what everything came from. And then we did that for, I guess it was almost 5 years before all this, before the iPod, came into its own, and the idea of actually doing shows like we're doing now even presented itself. So yeah, it was quite a long time, and pretty much, I don't know. The funny thing is, even now, like every week or month or whatever, like, we still going to do this? I don't know, and here it's all these years later and we're still doing it, but there's always these doubts. You want to do that? I don't know. Everything. We've tried to get it down to where it's fairly easy for us to do. And, obviously the most fun is actually, creating something. The fun isn't in, doing the social postings and trying to keep up with the Kardashians or anything. The fun is just actually producing something and making something that you enjoy and you hope other people enjoy, and getting, whether anybody listens or not, it's almost immaterial. It's the joy of doing things. And at least that's what it's always been for me. I know other people take a different tact on these things nowadays, but
I was looking up some stats yesterday, and I saw that there's an estimated 464 million podcast listeners in 2023.
Really?
Yeah, that's all over the world, not the United States, because we don't even have that many people. How many listeners do you think you had when you started?
Oh, at the beginning, it was really hard because there's no statistical analysis back then. I mean, I was fortunate enough to know, to have server space available, which most people didn't back in those days. And so that's why we could even do it, because even with Real Audio, we're talking some size to the files, and back then, server space was not cheap like it is now. So, but I had logs, and the funny thing was, at the very beginning, really nobody listened. I mean, it was really, just kind of doing what we wanted to do, and then over time, I would say in those first 5 years or so, I mean, we would look in the logs, and it would be the strangest. People would be coming to the server. A lot of people overseas and in English-speaking parts of the world were coming to listen. And then, just a lot of weird... one point we had the DOJ kept hitting the site, so the Department of Justice was listening in, because I'm assuming because it was a fairly novel thing at the time, and maybe they were curious as to what was going on. But I remember those logs, and I'm like, why in the heck would the Department of Justice be listening to this show? But they were.
Did it make you nervous?
When I first looked at it, and then as the weeks went on, to keep seeing it, I thought maybe it's just somebody at their desk. That's what I assumed at that point, because, this was all early days. And so we didn't think about that. You didn't think about how people would take this in. I mean, really, at this point, looking back from the future here, looking back into the past, of course it makes sense. You're sitting at some kind of job that's a grind or something, and you're like, hey, I want to have a couple of laughs while I'm doing data entry or something, then it makes total sense. But at the time, I'm like, well, what the heck is going on with this? But no, I wasn't overly worried. We weren't doing anything that was out of the realm, and of ordinary. Maybe it was too ordinary, to be honest. But yeah, it kind of shows you how people gravitate towards things. And at this point, now that we're in the future, I mean, really, this is, for all intents and purposes, this is, hand-selected radio. You just get radio with whatever you want as opposed to radio with whatever they're giving. And, people queue up their playlist and go through their shows, and that's what was that people were doing that way back when in a different manner, because it was kind of onesie-twosie. You had to click on it in order to get it, as opposed to being able to queue everything up. So,
well, your show is called Static Radio. Can you tell us some of your most popular stories and some of your favorite stories from since the time you've been doing that show?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough question, because we've got now probably, I guess, over 1,500 shows. We've really only missed about 3 weeks out of the 20-some years where we didn't record, and that happened because of 9/11 was one of them. Everybody was in shock, and we didn't record that week. That happened, and then deaths in family and so forth have kind of put a damper on things. But otherwise, we pretty much hit every week, even when we go, have family time and go on vacations and whatnot. We try to record ahead to have stuff to fill that time. Now, as far as favorite ones for me personally, I have a lot of stories about my kids mixed in with everything. And so probably a lot of my favorite ones would be when I'm telling stories about my children. Like my son, when he was little, he communicated very funnily, and he sounded to me like Mario from Nintendo, because his intonations and so forth, he wasn't saying any words yet, but he's like, ah, Dave, ah, and so I had kind of this little character that he was when he was little, before he really started speaking, was kind of like, if you ever listen to Mario in the games, he kind of has that kind of squeakiness to his voice and goes up, and and so I mean, that's who he was to me. It was kind of funny. As a kid, and so I have stories about him, being this little Italian man trapped in this baby's body, and trying to communicate with us, even though he doesn't know any words. And so, it's stuff like that that I remember more fondly, maybe than some other things. But the terrible part of that story is, as we find out later, as he gets older, he had to get tubes in his ears. I don't know if you had to deal with this in any way in your life, but
well, thankfully I did not.
Yeah. So one of the problems was he had these ear infections when he was little, and he literally could not hear us well. And so he was, whenever we got the tubes in his ears, he came out of surgery and was talking normally. So it kind of ruined my fun. But part of the thing was that he literally could not hear us well because he had fluid in his ears. And the funny thing is, when he first came out of surgery, they have a recovery room. He's a little tiny kid. I mean, he's not even, oh gosh, I can't remember how old he was. He was like 3 or 4 years old or something like that. And he hadn't started really talking well yet, so that was part of the problem. But anyway, the SpongeBob was on the television, and the first word that he really said to us that wasn't like "Mama, Dada" was "Bob," which is hilarious. So I'll take it as me,
you, Dad Bob.
but it was SpongeBob. It wasn't me. I like to say that it was, but no, it was SpongeBob. Yeah, and I mean it's those kind of as you get as you travel through time here, you lose a little bit, and so that story is I've encapsulated that in a way for the future. So even though my son wasn't there for it, I mean, he has no recollection of any of this. We have a firsthand approximation of it for him for later if he really wants to listen to it. But kids, maybe not.
Well, you can save all these stories for your kid's wedding. And my son was just married last week, and those kind of stories that you think are hilarious or embarrassing for them. Those are the best kind of wedding stories. So make sure you save those up.
They may not want to hear about that. Yeah, no. Unfortunately, another embarrassing one was my daughter when she was little, and we were trying to potty train her. She would love to go she had like a little kitchen set, and she'd play kitchen. And for some reason, she would go beside her refrigerator and would be going to the bathroom in her diaper, and we were trying to, get her to go into the toilet, right? And so she's playing. Then she goes over by the refrigerator, the little tiny refrigerator, and I'm like, I go, do you need to go to the bathroom? No. I'm like, Are you pooping? I'm not pooping. And she was pooping. And so that's another kind of quick hit story there. But so now to this day, every once in a while we're talking and like, I'm not pooping. But she was. It was terrible, but terribly funny. I mean, it was. How can you be, angry with a kid who's, doing that? But always beside the refrigerator. I don't know what the deal was with the fridge.
Well, I guess, maybe that's just her hiding place.
Yeah,
maybe.
It wasn't much hiding to it other than
it's like kids who play hide and seek in the broad daylight. They sit on a chair in the middle of the room and close their eyes and think nobody can see them. Maybe it's something like that.
Yeah.
All right. So what are some topics that have generated some unexpected results? Negative, positive, just something that you just didn't expect?
Well, my co-host lives up in Iowa, and there's a famous place in Iowa called the Surf Ballroom. I don't know if you're familiar, but it is where Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Richie Valens all played their last gig. And he doesn't live close to that, but he and I actually we went to school, and we have film degrees. We both went to school to make movies and whatnot, and so we made this movie. I can't even remember what year this was, but this was a long time ago. I think this was even pre-podcasting. I know it was pre-YouTube, so that's pre-2005. So we made this video called. Well, I'm blanking on the name of the video. I've been setting it up here. But about that, he went to the Surf Ballroom one day because he was traveling for some other reason, and he stopped by there because it's, infamous at this point. And he also went by the area where the plane crashed, which wasn't that far away. So he made this video that was kind of it was kind of poking fun at the situation, right? So here's Mason Airport where they took off. Here's the Surf Ballroom, the last gig, and then it was the middle of winter, and so he pulls up to where the crash site was, and it's just a wall of snow, and he's like, he did it all kind of reporter style. Over this wall of snow is where, they laid to rest, and then he did this horrible reenactment with Star Wars figures. So anyway, this video, it's actually still out there. It's called It Happened at Clear Lake. Clear Lake, Iowa is where this all happened. And anyway, so whenever YouTube came along, we posted it, and we literally got death threats.
Whoa!
For this, people were so mad because it wasn't that it's parody of sorts, right? So it's not necessarily that we love these things, right? You love the whole aspect of these people and their music and whatnot. It's just such a sad situation that they're in this kind of nowhere place in Iowa is the last time that they performed, and so you kind of playing on that angle, which is kind of sad. But I think the reenactment with Star Wars figures probably threw it over the edge. But yeah, we literally had people in all the comments where, some people thought it was kind of funny, and which is what it was meant to be. But a lot of people were like, you're terrible people, and we're very vicious. And so for a while we took it down because Miles, my co-host,
people are crazy.
Yeah, he was not enjoying the death threat aspect of it. But to be honest, that's not the first time we've gotten death threats. So it's not like
yeah,
now
used to it by now.
Well, I wouldn't say used to it, but it is actually we let all that kind of tone down, and it's back out there again. If folks ever care to watch it, it's a silly thing. I think we actually tried to put it in some festivals and things. But anyway, at one point.
Yeah, my wife and I watched Blazing Saddles yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Hadn't seen that in a while. But I'll bet you if a movie like that were released today, Mel Brooks would probably get some death threats.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, and it's kind of the comedy of the absurd in a way. If you compare it, like Blazing Saddles is just showing you how absurd some of these things are, right? It's just kind of stupid. So, but yeah, it's just kind of weird. But we got death threats in college for playing a song on the radio, and we played it quite often, maybe too often. But people would call in and threaten us at the college radio station we worked at. So I can't remember the name of the artist, but it was called Speedy Motorcycle, and it was this terrible singer, horrible singer. But I think of some note in the day, so it's very alternative rock style kind of situation. This is back in the days of Nirvana and so forth. So a lot of alternative grungy kind of things were happening. But anyway, it was a wild. To me, it was kind of a funny song, and the guy who was singing it was obviously very sincere in his attempts, but not very good in his singing. But I mean, it was an interesting song, and he was really trying, So people always make fun of Bob Dylan because he doesn't sing very well, but people love his music. So, go figure, right? You don't have to be a great singer to be considered great at it. So,
well, there's no accounting for taste. So people like what they like. All right, so I just did my 50th episode of my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and you've now recorded over 1,500 episodes.
It's always in increments of 50, right?
I guess you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you ever get tired of talking?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if you ever just get tired of talking with all the talking that you've done on your show.
You would think so. That's the hilarious part about it. And you would think that there would be no more stories or something, but stuff is constantly happening. I mean, the answer to your question is no, because there's always something. I always am surprised how people are like, oh, I'm so bored, or nothing ever happens, or I got nothing to do. And it's like, just go outside. I mean, inevitably, almost every week, all I have to do is go somewhere and something will happen to me that is funny or weird. Just human nature. The interactions you have with people, strangers in the public, are going to give you something. It's almost inevitable. And to people who go around and walk around and say that I'm bored or nothing exciting ever happens, they haven't opened their eyes. It's all around you. You just have to pay attention. And to me, I'm always surprised that you encounter so many people like that. It's like, what do you mean? I mean, if I were to go with them for a few hours, I can guarantee you that something would happen or be in our periphery that was something to talk about, that was something interesting or something that is relatable. It constantly happens. It doesn't. You just aren't thinking. I guess people aren't putting their heads in the right mindset. They're maybe a little too. In their own head, or maybe they're just not paying attention enough. But no, so that always gives you fodder to talk about. I mean, it's endless as long as you interact with people. Totally endless.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the most fun things about this podcast, doing the storytelling podcast, is hearing from everyday people who have amazing or fascinating stories, and they don't even realize it. Just going through daily life, and they don't recognize some of the stuff that they're doing is so interesting. I had a guy on a podcast a couple of weeks ago who's currently an attorney, and before that, he was a construction worker. And he got bored with construction and decided to go to law school. But before he was in construction, he was a corporate businessman. And he decided he wanted to do hands-on stuff and got into construction. And he didn't even realize how fascinating his stories were. And it's just really amazing to me that I started talking to him and just was riveted by all of his stories.
That sounds bad. I mean, think of all the insights going through all those different things, He's got to have incredible insights into stuff. Now, unfortunately, the first thing that popped in my head when you said he went from a construction worker to an attorney is, construction workers always have the best stories about not being able to find a bathroom because they're in a position where it's not available because you're building it, and so it's not like it's always there. But I have some friends who work construction, and yeah, there's always a story in there about this one time I'm on the job site, and then you have to deal with the realities of life.
Yeah, you got to find your own little tiny refrigerator and go there because your daughter was on the cutting edge.
That's right, exactly. You got to figure it out, right? Most people don't think. I mean, in an office, you don't think about any of that, but yeah, I mean, but those are just the realities of life that happen around you, and I think, and maybe it's just like a mindset or something. But I think you also have to have a mindset to it that will allow you to laugh at yourself in the situation. You have to, not go into it overly serious or overly embarrassed. We tell so many embarrassing stories on our show, but they're funny. They're funny because of the slight embarrassment that you may be involved in. And you can't just, bottle all that up. It's best to kind of, I'm not saying you just need to throw it out to the world, but it's best to not think about it in negative terms, but try to put a positive spin to it.
All right, I want to come back around to your podcasting. Have you done this as a primary career, or has this always been sort of a hobby for you?
No, it's always been a hobby. So yeah, we got like I said, it started in college radio, and we just wanted an extension of that, and so it's been a hobby ever since. There have been, this is I would call this like the third, what do you want to call it? The third immersion of podcasting. This is the one that seems to be taking. The first one was way back when in 2004, and then there was one right around 2011 was another big spike in things. But it's partially because of COVID and so forth. This has been the latest push for podcasting. It seems to be the most have the most traction. But the earlier ones, so right around, I can't remember what year, but somewhere in that 2010, 2011 time, we actually were part, it may have been before that, can I give my timeline here, it's been a little while, but we were actually part of Mevio, which was Adam Curry's business on podcasting back in the day. It started out as a thing called Pod Show, and it changed over because they wanted to do more video and stuff, and so let's call it Mevio. I guess they did a brainstorming thing or something, come up with that name, and so we were part of Mevio for a while, and we did earn a little bit then during that phase until it kind of ran out, but no, we've both always had our own jobs and careers that we've done in the background, and it wasn't fully focused on this. I think we did have a couple of attempts. I know I talked to this is a little bit of to me it's a funny story. Maybe it's sad in a way, but so back in I think it was before podcasting really became a term. So this is in the early 2000s. I actually had interaction with the person at XM Satellite Radio, and I said, "Hey, we do this little show. I think it might be good for XM. Is there any chance that we could get on there?" Right. This is when satellite radio was a thing, which not so good anymore. But so I talked to the guy, and I actually had a conversation with him on the telephone, and he was like, "Yeah, this is good and everything." He goes, "But get on a radio station, and if you get on a radio station, then talk to us, and we'll." But then we'll talk to you more then. And I was like, but I don't, from my brain, I was like, that's the whole point. We don't need to be on the radio. We're doing things. We're doing this. It's happening. We don't need a radio station, but if you would like to play it, but that's not where their thoughts were at that point, and what happened was, hey, they got absorbed into Sirius Satellite, and now, I mean, people get some people still get free subscriptions when they buy a car. I don't know anybody who pays for satellite radio, maybe who's not a trucker, So that's just kind of where that went. But to me, it was just kind of funny, and it was just another weird happenstance over the course of this thing of how kind of the history plays out, and little brushes with things here and there. So it's just kind of interesting that now satellite radio. I mean, really. I think they give parts of it away for free now, if I'm not mistaken. You don't get the satellite part, but they give part of the shows away, I think. So,
all right. So, what's the biggest difference between the podcast world now and what it was like 25 years ago?
Oh, nobody you knew was in podcasting. Nowadays, it's all these, celebrities or, pseudo celebrities all do a podcast in order to connect with people, and 25 years ago, there was nobody doing that. Nobody wanted to do this. That was like looked down upon. And, why would you do that? Well, because the reason we do it is because it's a convenient way for us to do what we want to do, as opposed to have, a bunch of people telling you what to do. And so I think that's the biggest difference. And I also think it's to me, at least, I always wish that there was more independent stuff that was higher on the chart. So if you look at the charts and everything, right, if you look down them, it's like, Jason Bateman and, Dana Carvey and Joe Rogan and all these people. These are all people who had some type of celebrity status before, right? And now they're into the new thing. And I wish there was more independence like yourself, up there, because I think would be nicer. I mean, it'd be nicer if it was that way. I realize that's not the way the world works, but I just think it's, a lot of Johnny-come-latelys are jumping into it, and they got a name, so they get some attention. And I don't know if if you listen to any technology podcast, but Leo Laporte is a big. He's on the list right now. Leo Laporte was a technology writer, and he was on Screensavers, which was a show on Tech TV, and then G4 Tech TV, and so forth. And so he had a certain amount of celebrity, but he wasn't like a television or movie celebrity, right? He was a technology celebrity. Those are the kind of people I like to see, because those are the kind of people who kind of came up with everything. I love to tell the story. So whenever the podcasting became a thing, I stole Leo Laporte's RSS feed, so I knew what RSS looked like, because he was doing it, right? And then the funny thing is, I got a friend who's actually been recording since 2000 in New York area, and he stole the feed from me to be on podcasts. So I like to think that most of podcasting was built on Leo Laporte's RSS feed, and it just keeps getting stolen from all these people. So I can't prove that, but it sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So
yeah, it seems reasonable.
Yeah,
and it's a perfect segue to my next question. And this is what I had intended all along. Did you have to know how to code your own RSS back then?
No, I stole it from Leo. I stole all of it from Leo. You didn't. There wasn't any automatic RSS, right? Like there is now. Everything's got built-in RSS to all the different tools that you use. So no, you had to build it. But since I was not. I'm not. I do some coding, very leisurely. I'm not a coder, and so yeah, I went and I'm like, well, Leo's doing this, and I mean, this was within, this is within months of RSS hitting the wild, right? Not even a month, probably, because I've been following it, and so, yeah, so I grabbed Leo's RSS and I looked at it and kind of figured it out, and then just built upon that, right? So that was easy enough because I had something, to demonstrate, right? So I had enough there that I could figure out what I was doing going forward. And actually, the funny thing is, most of my early RSS, I'm so lazy. I never changed the file size. So all the shows were the same file size, even though they weren't, because you used to have to put that in the RSS. And time, I just make them all the same. I'm like, I'm not going to look all that up. I just going to repeat the same thing. So the early ones were all kind of messy, but
all right, for the sake of the audience, can you explain what RSS is?
Really simple syndication, I think, is the official name of it. But it's basically what powers podcasting. So you have the information in the RSS, which is usually your title, some description, where the file is, right, where the MP3 file is, or whatever you're putting in there. And then usually it has the time and the size of the file. And nowadays, I'm sure it's got a lot more stuff in it as well. But that was kind of the idea behind it. And then it's a little bit like XML, if you're ever familiar with XML stuff, like if you do any kind of mapping or video work or anything like that, you deal with XML. But yeah, so and that's it. And then basically that whole RSS file will contain everything to find everything for you, and you can zap it into a program and it'll pull all of it down for you. So the funny thing now is that what I find interesting in this day and age, we have all our shows online. So if you go to the website, you can go all the way back to 1999 and listen to shows. But if you look on Spotify or on any of the aggregators, you will not find those because it's not capable of taking that many shows yet on the RSS feed. I think the maximum is 750. 700, I think. So anyway, it only takes the latest ones as opposed to everything. And so if you have a bunch of shows, eventually they're going to change that. This is because I'm using a PowerPress, I think is what it's called now on my WordPress site. And it can only do 750 entries for RSS. And so it can't push out more than that to all the aggregators, which there's another weird, I'll tell you another weird story, early story about aggregators is, so once we got, so Curry used to make a list. That's why I say we're in the first 50, because I don't remember when the list got made, but I know we were within the first 50. It may have been earlier than that. I just can't. You can't. There's no list anymore. Curry's got rid of it. It's not anywhere on the internet. I looked on the Wayback Machine, can't find it. But I knew we were in the first 50. But the hilarious thing is when iTunes came out with a podcasting area on Apple, we were on it, and we didn't ask any. We weren't asked. We were just part of that group that Curry had, and they took it wholesale from him and put it onto the iTunes store. And so I got a note from a listener, and the listener said, "Hey, did you know you're on the iTunes store?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" No idea. So yeah, they basically talk about, the history of stealing here. They stole Curry's list along with things that PBS was doing at the time, and that became the iTunes store at the very, very beginning. And they didn't ask anybody. You didn't have to give permission. I mean, nothing. Everything just happened. And then, wow. I found out because somebody who was kind of paying attention to that saw it and sent me a note. And that's the only reason I even knew. So, wow. Yeah.
So they were a pirate radio station way back then.
Yeah, they were. The funny thing is, I don't think I've ever seen anything from Apple that says anything about it, but I do know that Adam Curry has mentioned it in his interviews. And I mention it all whenever somebody asks me about this. I always mention it because I'm like, isn't that wild? Can you imagine? Can you imagine today doing that? Now you fill out all these forms. I can, and if you find us on any aggregator, we were never asked. There's only one place that asked if we wanted to be part of their podcast listing. Can you guess who that was?
To ask you to be a part of their...
Yeah, I got an email. It said, hey, would you...
Was it iHeart?
No, they stole it too.
I don't know. Who was it?
Amazon. Believe it or not,
wow.
All the bad press that Amazon gets on things, they sent me an email and said, we're doing a music store. Would you like your podcast listed on the music store? If so, click this link and fill out this information. And so I did, but they're the only ones. So any place you find us, no matter where it's at, there was no permission given. It was all just taken. They all just took it. I mean, I put it out there for that reason. But in this day and age, it seems kind of funny that happens so much. I mean, Spotify didn't give them any permission. I mean, just think of any iHeart, any of the major aggregators that have stuff out there. Never talked to any of them.
All right, so the Steve Jobs estate probably owes you some kind of royalty check or something.
Probably not, but yeah, it would be great if they would. But I mean, that's part of the deal, right? So if we get into the interesting world of copyrights and things like that, if you have no money, they don't care. They just steal it. If you have money, then you can enforce your copyright. That's basically
Absolutely.
Maybe we should talk to that construction worker attorney. Maybe he's got a side business to protect people's intellectual property or something. But,
yeah, I'll have him back on here and have you on here, and the two together can work that out.
Figure that out. But I mean, I don't really mind so much. I just find it interesting if people are, read the news and so on. And this is after the age of Napster. So, all that had been drug out into the world about copyrights and everything. And it's constantly still happens. But, people are like, well, I don't mind. I want them to hear it, right? I want it to be out there. But, the reality is you are creating something original, even if, parts of it are, my stories that have been here and there. It's just like anything that is created from any of the networks or streaming services. Whenever they have somebody on and interview them, that becomes an original work, even though the person on it may be somebody who's told that story someplace else. So it's just funny how differently people look at the same situation just because of their position in the world, right? So if you're a big media conglomerate, then it's mine. But if you're a little person in your basement doing something, then, oh, well, everybody can just have it. So, but it's not. It's the same thing. There's no difference other than your position.
Well, I just thought of something ironic while you were talking. And unlike the Alanis Morissette song, this is actually irony, because there was nothing ironic about any part of her song. You mentioned being afraid of being sued by Napster back in the day. Now you're still here, and Napster's gone. So that's ironic. You've outlasted them. Yeah,
well, that's there's a lot of things, the outlasting things. So if you remember, there was a thing called Odeo.com. Odeo was a podcasting platform back in the early days, and Odeo is now X, which was Twitter. Odeo became Twitter, which now became X, or I guess. Do you call it X? I don't call it X, really. I still call it Twitter, but...
Yeah, I call it both, but it sort of depends on the audience. I call it Twitter or X, depending on how you identify it. So yeah, I try to be. But
yeah, so many things have gone by the wayside over the years, and so yeah, I mean, I think. I don't. As far as longevity, it was never supposed to go this long. That's all happenstance. I thought for sure we would. I gave it 5 years, and then the weird thing about it, in 5 years, podcasting happened, and then podcasting is, let's go for another 5 years, and then something else triggered the next 5 years. Now here we're all the way down the road here, and I would have never in my wildest dreams thought that this little idea would play out for this long. And like you said, you get tired of talking. In my mind, probably back then, I'd be like, I'm not going to have anything to say. But the weird thing is that if we're pressed, so we try to tell timely stories. If we're pressed for the week and nothing interesting triggered anything, then we tell stories from the past. And we still tell each other stories that we've not ever told each other. And
Wow.
Your life is so full, of stories that it's limitless. At least from my perspective, it is. It seems to be. It's limitless. There's just so many things like that are out there. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, and that leads us to the last question here. Where do you think podcasting goes from here? What do you think the future of podcast is?
That's a good question. So it seems to me, I've always enjoyed audio as a mechanism for telling stories, because it's kind of like reading, right? So if you read, your imagination kind of takes over and fills in a lot of the blanks for the visual aspect. The same thing happens with audio. Now, in reading, you get to make up the voices as well, whereas in audio, they're already there for you. But it's more akin to reading than it is to video. It seems like there's a lot more video these days. They don't call them video podcasts. They still just call them podcasts. So I would assume they're going to move in that direction a little bit more. Although, for me at least, it's a little bit forlorn, because I think the audio aspect of it really does. It adds an element because it has the audience person kind of fill in the blanks and imagine, I mentioned, if we go back to my daughter's little kitchen, you'll imagine whatever you'll imagine, right? You don't know what it looked like. And then you'll put the person in there because you don't know what they look like. And so then it all becomes much more personal when it's that way, as opposed to when you see everything and hear everything, then there's not a lot of extra input that goes in there. There still is some, right? Because you develop whole personalities for people that you see on the video that aren't there necessarily. But with audio only, you really you produce the visual world for yourself, which I think is always interesting, because your visual world is going to be much more interesting to you than whatever I've got to give you. But where is it going from here? That's a good question. I mean, if you think about podcasting, it really is an extension of radio. It's essentially nonlinear radio in a way. And so, where does it go from here? I don't know. The technology will take us to the next thing. It goes way back. Do you ever play adventure games on the computer when you were younger? And it would say, you're at a door. What do? You open the door. I always thought that podcasting could be one of those kind of choose your own adventure kind of situations in the future, because then, it gives more interactivity to the person who's listening. So then they get to decide where you go with things. It's a lot of work to do those, because I've actually done a few over the years in the past. But, I always think that would be cool, but I don't know if it will be. Unfortunately, if that's my, kind of, what do you want to call it? That's the best interpretation I would love for it to have. The real interpretation, unfortunately, I think is just going to become simpler and simpler and more complete, because I think that's just where things are trending at the moment, right? So, and I think that the imagination gets pushed off to the side a little bit in some of these situations, more so than in the past. And I think that's the kind of sad reality of the future that I hope doesn't happen, but I see trending. But the future's always wide open. You never know where it's going to go, and there'll be some inventive person who will come up with something that will happen. Way back when I used to listen to Adam Curry on the Daily Source Code before podcasting became a word, and he loved to do these travel things where he'd describe where he was at, and as he traveled around. And I always thought that would be really neat if you could pin them onto a map, right? This is prior to the infiltration of GPS and so forth into our lives. But wouldn't it be great if you could just play something and then it would play something for you when you're at that location? And I think there's more experimentation to be done with that. They do it now in museums. You scan barcodes, QR codes, and it'll tell you about a painting. But wouldn't it be neat if you went to, let's say you went to the Grand Canyon, and then I went to the Grand Canyon and could hear what you experienced? That would be interesting to me.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
You're standing looking at this vista, and you're like, it's so beautiful, and you describe it, and I can hear what you describe, and then I'm there at the same time. So I think that would be an interesting use of technology to kind of bring people together, because it's all perspective, right? So, everybody has their perspective, and the interesting thing is everybody thinks they get absorbed in their own perspective. It's nice to hear other people's as well. And the more you hear other people's perspectives, the closer the world becomes to you, as opposed to being, all this unknown. And I think that would be an interesting use of it. I know I kind of went off. I'll give you a couple different ways there, so the future is not necessarily determined.
Great. I appreciate those thoughts. Those are some great thoughts.
But that would be good.
So, and a good way to wind down this episode.
Yeah.
So our guest this week has been OG podcaster Bob LeMent. Mr. LeMent, thank you for being here and sharing your stories. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Enjoy.
Before we go, I would like to request that you subscribe or follow my podcast on whatever platform you're listening to right now. In addition, please subscribe to Bob's Static Radio podcast while you're doing that. And that's it for this week's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you are.
That was Stories from Real Life. Join us again next week for another great storytelling journey. See you next time.